Hey, good morning, all. Welcome to the Common Good podcast. It's a Tuesday, and that means, good friends, that it's time for us to talk about politics here on the Common Good podcast. Which, because we're the Vote Common Good people, we're kind of always sort of thinking about politics around here, but we get very specific on Tuesdays. Robb Ryerse snuck away somewhere just outside of Fayetteville, Arkansas. Like Pagitt here outside of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Dan Dietrich lurking in the background, making it all look and sound the way it's supposed to. So those of you that had to yell last week when Paul Wallace and I were on because there was an echo, no echo today. Dan's here. He's got it covered.
Because I had a little bit of trouble last week, but
boy, there were some
I cleaned it up in post. You'll never notice.
Cleaned it up in post. Love it. Well, ended up being a little echo. But today, you're just going to hear echoes of goodness. That's all you're going to hear today on the live stream. Hey, Rob, how are things looking weather-wise there in Arkansas? Still hot and humid?
No, we were in the 90s last week, and this week in the high 50s, low 60s. It's shocking to the system. So it's overcast. Looks like it's going to rain today, but today's election day, so I'm feeling good. I am going to vote today.
It's a big time in Arkansas. Primary elections happening. They've been happening. We're going to talk a bit about primaries. In fact, before Keith Davenport, who's running for the state legislature in Kansas, is going to join us. Well, you got the wind at your back there. It's sunny and lovely here in Minneapolis. So for what that's worth, it's kind of hanging in there. We had a cold front this weekend. Boy, there are times where, like it gets to be 40 degrees in late May, and it just takes the hope right out of your soul. When you live in a place like I do. But speaking of hope in the soul, Rob, I have actually felt pretty good about the fact that the Republican Party in certain parts of the country seems like it's going to find some correction for itself. Now, I think, the Republican Party needs to sit it out for the next decade and think about what they've done by the kind of candidates they've elected. But boy, it feels like there's some corrections in the air. Now, not there in Arkansas. It seems like a Trump loyalist is going to be the nominee for the Republican governorship, but that's more probably because of a family dynasty. She's a bit more of a Hillary Clinton character. That she's just running on the coattails of a family name. That's a little dig at you Republicans that support, that we're so bothered by Hillary Clinton running on the family name and are not bothered by Huckabee Sanders running on her family name. But do you have any sense that, with Madison Cawthorn losing his primary, with David Perdue in Georgia not going to win the primary as the Trump-backed one, the Trump's work in Georgia trying to get the Secretary of State out of office is looking like tonight it's not going to happen? It feels just like maybe there's some slight correction happening internally in the Republican Party. Do you think there's any hope that that's actually what's happening?
Well, I think those two races are different in my mind. I think the Madison Cawthorn situation is not an indication of anything good in the Republican Party. We would love to look at this election and say, listen, Madison Cawthorn was, this is a repudiation of this type of politics. I actually don't think that's the case.
Oh.
I think Madison Cawthorn was torpedoed by Republican operatives with a series of scandalous leaks. It was just an unending drip of stories about Madison Cawthorn for the last month before the election. Some of them self-inflicted, but not all of them. Some people are saying that, a big part of this was, the coke-fueled orgy, allegations that he made against his Republican counterparts, his colleagues, and that this was retaliation for that. But the thing about what happened with Madison Cawthorn is there's kind of two things. One is it showed that you can still get Republican primary voters to vote against someone by insinuating that they are gay, which was a number of these scandals were related to that. Is hand on the crotch
Oh,
of a of a staffer, the dressed in lingerie,
I
involved
see.
in
So you think it's more doubling down on the classic,
yeah,
anti-LGBT,
yeah,
even though Madison
Ye-
Cawthorn is not
yeah,
outwardly
it's
a gay man. You think there was that you don't think it was people saying, look, this dark MAGA business, all this
no,
Trumpism thing is what the voters
no.
in this case in North Carolina moved against. You think it was just a particularity of this cat
I do,
and
I
his
do,
own problem.
I do.
Well, I was just hoping a little bit that maybe there was
Eh.
some,
Now, I mean, what we could
and
hope
Georgia
is
kind of
that
shows that too. And some parts of, some of the elections, just the primary voters have not gone along with the big lie supporters in quite the way that a lot of us had worried.
yeah, yep,
Now, whether they
yeah,
all come back home, on election day is something that we hope, that people are willing to break with the Republicans,
yeah.
stay broken.
Yeah, and what we're seeing is what we're not seeing is in any of these races, whether it's Governor Kemp in Georgia or this state legislator who beat Madison Cawthorn. What we're not seeing is like a vocal anti-Trumpism candidate winning, a never Trumper. We're not
Mm-hmm.
we're not seeing someone like an Evan McMullin or even like a Liz Cheney,
Yeah.
someone who's taking a stand like that winning these elections. What we're seeing is a kinder, gentler Trumpism winning.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
it's disconcerting. And what we're seeing is these candidates who continue to have horrific policy positions and beliefs, just maybe their loyalty to the person of Donald Trump it might vary, but we're not seeing any kind of, I don't know, self-reflection from the Republican Party. I don't think. I'm so happy to see Madison Cawthorn lose.
Yeah, so much.
Frankly, but I would much rather have seen him lose in the general election than in the primary, because I think that race now becomes much more difficult for Jasmine Beach Ferrara to win.
Yeah, no, look, there's no doubt I'd rather have a Democrat win that seat than for the Republicans to do some correction. I just also think that, repudiating full MAGA Trumpism whenever that happens is just a good little sign. It's like when you're sick and any thing that makes you feel, that shows that you're getting better. I have a little more energy today. My appetite is up a little bit. I'm not sniffling the way I was. Any of those we should count as a good thing. And it's easy to just be straight up partisan. And I'm comfortable with that right now. I think it's what's necessary. And we need to see some kind of improvement. So maybe tonight, in Georgia, in Arkansas, where you are, in Alabama, I mean, there's just so much going on. Hey, another piece of news: Vladimir Putin has banned a bunch of people from going to Russia. Said, hey, little retaliation. You don't get to come here to Russia, and put a bunch of people on that list. Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, Morgan Freeman, a bunch of people are banned for whatever reason. 1,000 people or more banned. Did you know who's not banned? The twice impeached failed presidential candidate Donald Trump, not banned from going to Russia. Of all the people you could put on a list, the former president of the United States is somebody who's not banned. All these other people are. And maybe maybe Putin is just trolling people like us. Maybe he's just trolling the American media. Maybe he's just trying to stir up all this, Russia talk about Trump. But it's just unbelievable that the former president of the United States is the only one of prominence that, and by Trump's claim, as a president who was so hard on Putin and so hard on Russia, but he's one guy that's not being banned at all. It's just really, truly something.
I feel like this is one of those things that I aspire to. I would like to be on the list of people banned by Vladimir Putin. Wouldn't that be great to you're just going through your Monday, just having a normal day, and then you get the little alert on your phone that you have been banned from visiting Russia. Listen, so this is a weird story. And I really wonder about the timing here. Like, what's going on with this? What's the purpose of this? Is Vladimir Putin about to do something? Did he do something yesterday that we don't know about yet? And this is purely distraction? Because Vladimir Putin has shown that he understands the American media and cultural landscape better than most. We think about Russian interference in the in the 2016 election, and how Russia figured out that they could create Facebook groups that would and create news. It feels like it's this Russia's this thing so far away. And unless of course you're Sarah Palin, can see Russia from your porch. But it seems like there are people in Russia that really understand the American news cycle and American media and how to manipulate it.
Right.
And I think you're right on the money that they know that this would be a story, that this would be something that would get noticed, that putting out a list that includes certain people and doesn't include other people would capture capture the American media and the American attention for a period of time. And I wonder if it's something that, was done intentionally to distract attention for, some other nefarious purpose. I don't know. I wonder if we're going to find out in a couple of days that something big happened in Ukraine, or I don't know. This is a weird story that just something doesn't feel. My spider senses are tingling on this one.
Yeah, I could see that. I'm not even sure it would require a particular action that they're trying to distract from. I think it could simply be one of the ways to really fracture this country is to show that a former president of the United States, previous to his run, during his presidency, and afterward, is deeply tied in with Russia. Just that is significant enough to have great effect in the United States. And I believe that it's true. Yeah. There is no one I know. I know Russians who live here in Minnesota who don't have as much contact with Russians as the Trump campaign and the Trump crowd does. It's just simply stunning. And look, and the fact that no one in that circle, Trump himself, doesn't come out and say, hey, I should also be banned. There's no comment about this at all. It is just part and parcel to I think, just all the nonsense that is this. Hey, speaking of people being banned, the Catholic Church under the Bishop of San Francisco has decided that Nancy Pelosi is not their kind of Catholic any longer, and she can't. She's not eligible to receive communion from the diocese in San Francisco, which is her home. So her home Catholic Church leaders have said that she can't receive communion. Really, truly stunning. Now, people that don't know, and I'm not a Catholic, so I can't speak firsthand knowledge, but if you understand about how Catholic structure works and hierarchy works, the bishop of a particular diocese is really in charge of that diocese. And then, of course, there's cardinals and the Pope and so on. But they're the one that kind of gets to run what happens inside the parishes in that diocese. So in Washington, D.C., where Nancy Pelosi works, her work home, she's eligible to receive communion. In her living home, the bishop there says she can't. And there's this fight among the bishops in the United States. So you truly cannot take one action of a bishop and say that's Catholics across the United States, Catholics across the world, or even Catholics in the San Francisco diocese. That being true, this is really something that these bishops, this new class of bishops, even with the Pope being so much more open and progressive than we've seen in a long time, a lot of these bishops actually come up under the older style of Catholicism. And they're naming names and saying that policy positions that violate the Catholic Church teachings are then going to be reasons for what the bishop there called pastoral intervention, meaning we need to correct Nancy Pelosi so that she comes in line with Catholic teaching. It's extremely difficult for people like us who are trying to help Catholics and other Christian faith voters to move their political identity. It's just particularly problematic, and I think just heartbreaking that I'm not a Catholic. I don't think, I don't really hold to I don't think it's a great idea to have communion carry the kind of weight that it does in the Catholic Church and have a bishop be able to decide if you can receive the outward sign of the grace of God. But that's what their structure is. And to remove that from someone is just something else.
Yeah. It seems like every 9 months or so, we get one of these stories where, a bishop has banned some politician from receiving communion. I think, there was some discussion about Joe Biden, being banned in Boston or something. I have some memory of that. This is one of those things that, like, this is a bishop grandstanding, getting his 15 minutes of fame. Listen, being the bishop of San Francisco, that's a big deal, right? Like, I mean, I have never achieved that level in the ecclesiastical world. It's a big deal. But listen, nobody knows, nobody cares, nobody thinks about the bishop of San Francisco. He is getting
Catholics
his 15 minutes.
I promise you, Catholics. Oh man, Catholics.
I'm feeling cynical this morning.
You are. I'm telling you, there's only 260. There's 260 Catholic bishops in the United States across the diocese, and
they're not all. Google that, or did you actually know that right off the top of your head?
Is there a difference between what you know in your head and what you know in your hard drive? Is there really, truly a difference?
No, I guess there's not.
I knew that in my hard drive brain. Yeah. They're not all equal, all the bishops. Right. Like any structure, people carry different weight. It's a big deal. It's a big deal when an official statement from a bishop says we are now basically moving this person of public prominence into a place of being in disagreement and out of step with the teachings of the Catholic Church. And this is around abortion. That's what it's about. And what's curious about it is Nancy Pelosi has not changed her position on abortion at all. What's happening, and the reason why I think it has particular saliency, is that it's showing that the anti-abortion movement feels more strengthened now because of the leaked document of 5 unelected judges' decision about the constitutionality of abortion in this country. So now I think it's paired with that. I think it's paired with now these bishops think we are the ones, our opinion is the one that matches the federal government understanding of constitutionality, and therefore what we say is going to carry different weight. And now you need to fall in deeper alignment with us because now so I think it's a part of that. I think it's part of this larger cultural shift that's not just that bishops try to, get a little bit of attention because, look, I mean, you don't become a bishop because you want to be famous, probably, right? It's pretty niche. being a Catholic bishop.
You,
But
you don't not for the Twitter followers. That's not why not for the clout.
That's right. You'd start a YouTube channel if you're doing that. But I will say they have a disproportionate amount of effect in the United States. Mm-hmm. It's not lost, shouldn't be lost on anyone that the great majority of our Supreme Court justices are Catholics, and that the 5 justices that ruled the way they are seemingly going to on Roe versus Wade are all Catholics. This is Catholic narrating. This is where it's hard for some people to grasp that 50 years ago, it was hard for Catholics to find a place in American politics.
Yeah.
When John Kennedy was elected and when Catholics were on the rise, there was all kinds of Protestant resistance to Catholics. Yeah. That has almost completely shifted in the religious narrative at the highest levels. The number of people in Congress, the number of people in the judiciary, especially on the Supreme Court, that are who are Catholic. So I think that's what this is really about. I think it's something much deeper than just a particular bishop or something.
Yeah. Now, Doug, I want to shift conversation a bit because we have I know that you've got a little bit different setup today and you're not seeing the comments in the chat. There is a lively conversation happening in the chat, in the comments with folks. We were asked about what our thoughts were about Vladimir Putin's health. And if we think that he's ill, and there's quite a conversation taking place in the comments about speculating about Putin's health. So I thought maybe we ought to comment on that since it's happening live in our chat. Do you have any thoughts? Have you seen these stories about?
I've seen the stories and heard them. Yeah. That
Putin's got cancer, that he's got moon face. This was a term that I didn't know before. There's one I can't remember his name, but there's a doctor I follow on Twitter who's he's an expert in body language, and he often will examine public events and, press conferences and whatnot, trials and whatnot. We'll examine all of them based on, through the lens of body language and interpreting them. And he has done some work on Putin as well. And has talked about moon face being a thing that and has shown pictures where it seems to be like a result of using steroids, which would be, an indication of possibly cancer treatment. So what do you think? Is Vladimir Putin gravely ill and doing this, because he's got, I don't know, starting World War III was on his bucket list?
I've heard speculation about that he is sick and he's using these actions, especially around, the invasion of Ukraine and the atrocities there, in order to narrate a different story about his own strength. It very well could be. And look, this is where you're whether he's as sick as people are saying or not, who could know? He's clearly sick. These kinds of rumors wouldn't be out and about and couldn't be staying alive if there wasn't something to it, right? They would just squash it. Right. That would just be the end of it. Nobody with any influence would be talking about it if there wasn't some reason for it. So there's probably something there, how sick he is or whatnot. But it also shows that the individual choices and the individual experiences of leaders, especially global leaders, especially dictator-leaning kind of leaders, how much impact that has. Like, we do need to fix our systems. We do need to have structures that can keep things right. But so often the struggles that we see in the world, the things that nations do, companies do, businesses, organizations, it comes down to people behaving in certain ways because of human experience, not only because of systems and structures. And this, to me, is an indicator of that. If any of his behavior is actually related to his own health, then it even doubles down on that idea that it's just extremely dangerous when someone has the kind of power that he does, where his own health issues can be so dangerous. Look, you saw that in the United States with Reagan, when in the final years when Reagan was starting to show signs of what ultimately, affected him so deeply with Alzheimer's. I think you clearly saw it with Trump. There's people who worry about that with Biden, that the physical capabilities of a person start to have public implication policies. But sometimes it's even more than just, hey, the person's slowing down or is not keeping up their faculties, or, has to go in for a dementia test, as Trump did, and then told us about man, woman, camera, leaves, cars, whatever it was, when he just named the things that he could see. Remember that one? This is just all part of the reality that is of the systems and structures that we live in. That we don't just live in a political world; we live in a people-run world, and people make decisions and do things, and it has great implications on other people and their lived lives.
Yeah. Well, hey, we've got Keith Davenport on the line, so
all right,
we're going to segue over to him.
Hey, speaking of people whose lives really make a difference, Keith Davenport is running for the state legislature in Kansas. Keith, so glad to have you with us. Congratulations, man. We can't quite hear you yet, but we'll keep talking, and you see if you got a.
Can you hear me? Can you hear
there
me now?
We go. Yeah, that's great.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Hey, Keith, thanks for being with us today. How does one come about to run for the state legislature in Kansas? How does that happen?
Yeah, I mean, living here helps, and just the love for the state.
You're no Dr. Oz, is what you're saying. You actually choose to run for office in the state that you live in. That's right.
Just really wanting. We really need people in the state house who understand what we're going through at the local level. And I think so often we find that state legislatures are chasing national narratives. But here in District 43, we have some really significant local issues that are of concerns to us. And we need somebody in Topeka that really represents those. Thinking about childcare and good public schools, our home, the cost of home ownership here has been skyrocketing. So we need jobs that can keep up with that. We need roads that help our economy grow and not slow it down. And so just thinking about some really practical local issues that can be solved at the state level that we can go and do. And so just thinking about how can we have a state representative who is attentive to the needs of our constituents, who is available to answer questions and to respond to concerns, even if those are coming from folks who are on the opposite end of the political spectrum from you. And I'm thinking back a few years ago, I was working at Johnson County Community College. It's a local community college here. And I had just gotten a promotion, and I took over this leadership development program for students there. And it was one of those extracurricular programs where students voluntarily came apart. And my first semester there, they had been contracting out a speaker to come in and lead this program for years. And so I kind of sat through, and what I found was he was a really engaging speaker, and he really made the students laugh, but it just didn't quite sink in as this practical leadership stuff you can take on. So what I ended up doing is I brought a team together. We worked, including some students who gave me feedback. We built a whole new leadership program that was really focused in on practical lessons they could use right now as leaders of clubs or in their classes, or many of them worked while being in school, but then also they could practice them now, but it also would work 10 years later if they were owning their own business, or they were in the C-suite of a large company, or if they were in their own civic engagement. And so that's really what I'm hoping I can bring to Topeka, is the sense of let's look at what we have now, and then let's bring folks together and build something better that's practical, that solves problems both now and for the long term for Kansas and for our community in District 43.
Yeah. Well, I love that you are talking about local issues, and in that was perfect candidate segue into, I'm going to talk about roads in Johnson County, Kansas. That's fantastic. But one of the things that you said is of interest to me. You talked about this relationship between, the national narrative and state legislatures. What we've seen over the last several years, and really and really amplified in the last few months, is that there's what happens in state legislatures around the country can impact everybody in America. This is state legislatures are like, I mean, like, does anybody even know who their state senator is, their state representative? Like,
Sure.
this is like not at the top of the list in terms of, people's political interest. But what we've seen is that state legislatures have tremendous impact on not just their state, but impact nationally. Like, so this is how is that factored into, how do you think about all of that and the role that state legislatures play in, shaping not just policy and the situation in your state, but the whole country?
Yeah, and I think what's unfortunately true at times is when a state legislature is primarily in national news for what's going on, and even if you're really thinking about how it might impact America as a whole, oftentimes the people in their state are the folks who are getting left behind in the midst of that. So if the state legislature is primarily working on policies in response to federal policies or some grand overarching narrative, it's the people in their state that get left behind. That's not always true, and it has to be good balance, because the state also has responsibility to govern in relationship with the federal government. But you have to have balance there, so that you're not only following whatever some national narrative is to the detriment of your people, to the detriment of constituents. And so that's one of the fears I have. If the only thing we're hearing from our state legislature is how they're responding to the federal government, we're really missing out on some major crises this year. Actually, this legislative session, yesterday, the session in Kansas ended. And in Kansas, there's one group that's estimating that there's about 175,000 kids in need of childcare, but there's only, about 150,000 kids in need of childcare and only about 75,000 spots for children in childcare. So we literally have twice as many kids who need childcare than we have spots for them. But childcare didn't come up even one time in this legislative session in any kind of significant policy issue. So it's easy to get sucked into where you get some media coverage perhaps, but then miss out on what the real needs of Kansans are.
Hey, Keith, thanks for running it. It's really great, and so glad that you are. But I'm interested in a little more story about why you decided to run, right? Tell us about
Sure.
the Kansas legislature. It's not a professional job, right? It's part-time job. Can you just describe that and your process for thinking about, hey, I should add to the other things I want to do in my life, this work? I'm particularly interested. Yeah. I had a similar journey back in 2010, tried to run for the Minnesota State Legislature and didn't get the nomination. So, I'm now doing this. But I would have had to do this anyway, right? Because here it's part-time work. Can you describe some of that and then say a bit about why choose that avenue for influence as one of the 165 represented voices in the Kansas legislature, as opposed to doing other things where you influence those people?
Yeah. Okay. That's a great question. So I first moved to Kansas 15 years ago to go to seminary and to pastor churches and connect with the Church of the Nazarene, which their international headquarters is here, just about 15 minutes from my house. And so that's how I came out here, and it was definitely immediately plugged in. I was in Kansas City, Kansas. I was in Lawrence, and just figuring out ways for that local church to get connected in the community in significant ways beyond what you might think of for religious services, but also thinking about food pantries, connecting in partnerships with colleges and universities and the students. And so sort of this DNA of making the community better has been part of my professional career from the get-go. Fast forward a little bit, I was pastoring churches that were small. We were restarting congregation, didn't pay a salary, so I had to get another job too. That's how I ended up at the community college that I mentioned earlier. And then through a long journey there, I ended up working in local government with Johnson County, Kansas government, and in both county manager's office and the mental health center. And the reality is, as I got engaged in that local government. I loved it. I loved understanding how all the policies work together to shape the community, how it wasn't as simple ever as just black and white as you can put in 280 characters on a tweet. It was always everything's connected. And I enjoyed trying to figure out the most effective way to do that. So I went back to school, got my MPA. But to your point, Doug, you're absolutely right. It's a part-time deal. So in Kansas, this is a real struggle. So legislature is only in session from January to about May. You get a per diem is your income from that experience that equates to about $22,000 a year. So the only folks who are able to serve in the legislature in Kansas are the folks who either maybe are independently wealthy, or they have a partner who has enough income to support their whole family, or if they have some kind of job that allows them to be gone for half the year and then still keep their position. So it definitely limits the candidate pool there. So that how that plays into my story. So I have 4 kids, 3 of them in the school district here locally. And when I was working in local government, while I was really interested in state politics, you can't keep your job in local government while serving an elected office in the state. And so in order for me to run at that point, I would have had to quit my job, which not possible.
Yeah.
So I actually just shifted careers back in November, back into the nonprofit world. And so now I'm the executive director of 2 nonprofits doing the same thing. One's the Missouri Center for Employee Ownership, and we're just this week filing our articles of incorporation for the Kansas Center for Employee Ownership. So it's an economic development group that helps baby boomer business owners be able to retire and keep their businesses and jobs in the community after they do so. So that's kind of the short version of how I ended up here. Definitely a struggle. I'm so grateful that I have a job that's supported my interest in running and excited about it. And so I have 2 different boards of directors that are both in favor of it. And then we're part of a national network that's both also supported me running while continuing to serve in my role with these organizations.
How much do you know already about what you're going to do when you're the legislator? Do you know that world well? Have you tracked along with those people? Have you kept up? Are you like, hey, I really do want this job, or is it something where you're thinking, I sure I'm going to win. I want to do this, but I'm not totally sure what I'm going to be up to.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm up for it. That's for sure. And what drives me is being available to the people in my community to solve problems. I don't really know what all the day-to-day stuff looks like. Actually, you could do a quick Google search. You could see that government transparency is a little bit of an issue in Kansas.
That's
so
right.
Don't really quite know how all the pieces come together. But I have talked to several state representatives and state senators who have been supportive of our campaign and are excited about the chance to have me join their ranks. And so looking forward to the opportunity to serve the people of District 43.
Yeah. Keith, what has you just filed a couple weeks ago to run, so you're right kind of in the beginning stages. What has there been anything that surprised you so far? Take us, like, give folks like a little window into like what it's like to run for office. Anything that has been a surprise to you? Anything that people would go, whoa, well, that's not what I expected?
Sure. 2 things that popped out in my head as soon as you said that. One is it took me a minute to shift from being a pastor to being a candidate, which is kind of I know that's an experience that probably not many folks have also traveled, but
3 of us.
okay.
3 of us on
The
this
3 of
call.
us.
the right audience, right? So, I mean, it's a different conversation. I'm trying to be a spiritual advisor at some point to gathering the community around to create some political change, right? And so that's been a little bit of a shift in the way I connect with folks. But a positive one. And I've had a good team around me that's helped me be able to connect with my community. The other piece is, so I'm running as a Democrat in a conservative district that's had a Republican incumbent in office for 10 years without too much of a challenge. And so on the front end, when I was first talking about running, a lot of folks were surprised that I'd run in this district, or they warned me about the long road ahead of me that I have. And so what has come on the backside of that then, as soon as I filed, I have been shocked by the number of conservatives that have come over to the campaign already. I think I've actually talked to more conservatives than Democrats at this point. And it just goes back to what I mentioned on the front end. People are ready for a change because they're ready for a state representative who actually understands local issues, who's available to answer questions and to respond to concerns, even if you're on opposite ends on an issue. And so that's been refreshing to know that folks really are seeking good governance and engaged elected leaders and not just following a party. And I'm hoping that we can continue to lean into that in the weeks ahead.
Well, so when these folks come to you and they have a history of being conservative, voting for Republicans, I'm guessing, and maybe you're one of the first Democrats they've ever thought about voting for.
Right. Yeah.
What do you hear from them? What's driving? I mean, other than, well, hey, I can get access to you. I couldn't get access to, fill in the blank. What do you think's going on with them? You're a people person. You teach in colleges. You pastored people. Like, you vibe out that there's something more than just what someone's telling you. What's your suspicion about what's driving that?
I think that it comes down to trust. I was just having this conversation with a guy this week who has voted for Trump in the last two presidential elections and will likely vote Republican in every presidential election for his life, but reached out to me wanting to meet. And I think it just comes down to being available, like you said, like the access, but then like sitting down and like, oh, this is a real person who actually has a good head on his shoulders, who understands our community, who has a family here, who is really seeking to do something good for the community, and not just a bunch of politics. And I say that politics in the negative connotation of just playing games or moving stuff around, like just a real person. And I think that it's refreshing for folks to have an elected leader who's just a real person, who's can sit and have coffee and chat really personally. And so that's really simple and probably oversimplifying it. But I think just folks are excited to have a state representative they can trust on a personal level.
Mm-hmm.
Keith, we launched last week, or was it 2 weeks ago? I guess it was 2 weeks ago because we didn't have a podcast.
We launched. Yeah,
the last time that we were together, we made the announcement that we were launching a project through Vote Common Good called Candidates for Common Good, where our work is inviting voters of faith, particularly white evangelicals and white Catholics, to use the common good as their voting criteria. And what we're doing as well is asking candidates who are running for office to use the common good as their governing criteria should they be elected. And we had kind of our first round of recognitions of candidates who step forward and say, yeah, I'm a candidate for the common good. Oh, I just did it. I'm a candidate for common good. We'll have to have Dan edit that out in post, right, Doug? We got to get the out of there.
We try to drop the thes out of vote the common good or candidate for the common good. Just a little self-editing going on.
Yeah, Dan will have to fix that in post. So we've invited candidates to do that, and we've had great response so far. Folks like elected officials like Ted Lieu and Katie Porter. Senate candidates like Tim Ryan, gubernatorial candidates like Nan Whaley in Ohio and Chris Jones here in Arkansas, and then we had a couple of state legislative candidates. Lisa Parks, who's actually running to be my state senator.
That's great.
And you, Keith, there in Kansas. What was it about becoming a candidate for common good that resonated with you, that made you want to be a part of this group of candidates that are stepping forward and saying, yeah, I'm going to make the common good my governing criteria?
Yeah. So you joke about trying to get the out of Vote Common Good. Before the Candidates for Common Good came out, my campaign slogan was already for our common good. So I used our instead of the or what. So nice. When I found out that Candidates for Common Good was coming out, it was like, duh. I mean, like this is me. I mean, like,
and I have to. It would really be making a statement if you weren't a candidate for common good when your slogan is.
That's right. So it just made sense. I talked about my background as a pastor and then working in the community through that role and through county government. And so to me, it doesn't make sense if you're going to run for office if you're not going to be for our common good. Like it seems like we should have the smaller group of folks in elected office, like that. The smaller group should be the folks who aren't doing that. And unfortunately, that's not the case right now, but it should be and it can be. And so I think it's great that we're collecting candidates together who are really making that their rallying cry for them and their campaigns, that takes first priority. It's really easy to put in policy or to vote for things that help your own family's pocketbook at times. But when you step back and actually think about what it means for the community around you, it changes your perspective on every single policy, every single ballot measure that comes up, because the vote is different. I was thinking recently about some historical Kansas tax policy. So Sunday was the 10-year anniversary of the Brownback experiment, which has national infamy now. And in 2020, so 8 years after that first went into place, when folks were losing their jobs because of the pandemic, people were trying to get unemployment. Or there are other folks like me who kept my job, but I was the victim of fraud for unemployment. Somebody filed an unemployment claim in my name.
Goodness.
I started looking into this because there was this big media mess about how awful the department was. But if you look into it, it was under that bad tax policy from 2012 that seemed like it was going to be good for everybody. People voted for what maybe was lining their pocketbooks at the moment. Well, it made the Department of Labor have half the staff and not be able to update their computer systems for years. And so the community as a whole felt that because it was a bad policy that wasn't for our common good.
And people who don't know what the Brownback experiment was, Sam Brownback was, some people might have heard of him because he was a senator, but before that he was a governor, is that right, of Kansas? And this was a cut taxes kind of experiment and, shrink the government down to the size, to right size the government, and ends up just having all kinds of detrimental effects. Is that how you read it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's like the best experiment we have of trickle down economics, and essentially prove they don't work. And it left Kansas middle class and low income wage earners behind for years, and we're still 10 years later digging our way out of that hole. And so it's still a key issue. But again, it's that vote common good of figuring out what might be good for me. Maybe I'll have lower taxes, but that's not good when people need essential government services as well. You have to have the right balance there.
Yeah. Well, Keith, one of the things that I shared a couple of weeks ago when we talked about you joining us here as a guest is that one of my favorite words, I don't know, since I was a kid, was Davenport.
Here we go.
And Rob and Dan were like saying, hey, don't bring up all your Davenport jokes. But like when I first heard that a couch or a sofa is also called a Davenport, I don't know, I fell in love with it. So could I get a yard sign just to hang on the wall behind me here? Because, a political sign that has my favorite word in the English language on it.
Well,
how has it been growing up with such a stalwart name as a large piece of upholstered furniture?
Well, you're going to love this because in fourth grade, as a class assignment, we all had to make our presidential campaign slogans. It was a presidential election year. Nice. So my campaign slogan was "Rest easy with Davenport."
Oh, God, I love you so much. I love you more. I love you more than I did before. And to you, Dan and Rob, Keith and I are going to go have a little time together, and you're not invited because they said don't bring up any more of your corny Davenport jokes.
Keith, if people
how did you bring it up in this campaign though? Did you say, hey, back in elementary school, I came up with?
No, because most people don't know that's another name for a couch. Exactly. So it takes to explain the joke. It's not a joke anymore. So
or it's just one for it's like comic. It's like jokes for other comics. Like only the comics get the joke. Yeah,
so I'll save it for you.
Thank you. Well, yeah, there's a whole generation of people that you just might be missing out on if you don't throw in a Yeah, we can talk about puns and campaigns later because I think it would really cushion the campaign.
Okay.
Go ahead, Rob. What else you got? What else you got for the good,
Keith,
for the good future legislator?
Give us a shameless plug, Keith. How can people find you? Where can they want to follow the campaign? They want to learn more. They want to donate because I imagine it takes money to run for office. How can they find you?
That's right. People can join the campaign at keithforkansas.com. You can find us on all the social media platforms with that same name, except for Twitter is my personal name, Keith M. Davenport. Love to have you join the campaign, donate, even volunteer from afar if you'd like. We're building a great campaign, and the more the merrier.
Hey, how surprised were you that keithforkansas.com was available? Are you surprised that someone hadn't swooped that up? I'm a little surprised.
Was an obvious choice and didn't really think about it. So it works.
Good. Well, congratulations. You missed an opportunity there with the Davenport, but I think keithforkansas.com is definitely the right choice. Keith, we're super excited about you running, and as we are a lot of other candidates. Any final words from you about what you're up to or what you want people to know?
I think the biggest thing that folks across the country should know is that public education is really on the ballot this fall in Kansas, in addition to a lot of the national narratives you're going to hear about. And we really need folks' help to save public education in Kansas. And that's really been the heart of the campaign so far. There's a lot of bad policy that just got passed, and we have to undo it or our systems are going to fall. So really love to connect with folks who support public ed and can help us keep that going in Kansas.
Great. So important. Hey, thanks for running. All the best.
Thank you.
Wow. Boy, he's a great candidate.
Just good people just up tremendous. And down the ballot. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. I think one of the great public services that we provide here is giving access to candidates who are running, from the Senate all the way to, legislatures, and people just realizing these are just ordinary people. Politics is people business. Yeah. And it's important to humanize and to personalize the political spaces.
Yep. Well, I'm going to head out and vote for several of my favorite people. I have this really
vote early and vote often.
Yeah,
I have this unique, the same election.
Yeah, this unique opportunity this time around to vote for several people that I personally know and really, really like and think would be, sometimes you kind of hold your nose and it's kind of a lesser of two evils kind of thing. And sometimes it's like, I don't really know who these people are, but I've had a chance to get to know several of the people I'm going to be voting for today. And man, I cannot wait to vote for them. And that's a rare feeling. So I'm excited about that.
Well, and those who are in states, Arkansas is one of those. Georgia, I know Alabama. That might be it for the.
Yeah, there's a runoff in Texas.
Yes, that's right. If you're down, if you're in that South Texas area and you know anyone down there, send the word out. I don't know, post something, call someone, send a text message, and say, "Hey, you live in this state. Get out there." Voting's not the most attractive thing that people do in their lives, so it's kind of nice to encourage somebody along every now and again to make sure that they do it and that they engage in it, full-throatedly and happily. Hey, are you voting for Chris Jones today?
Yeah, I'm voting for Chris Jones.
All right.
Today.
So after today, Chris Jones will be the Democratic nominee if things go your way?
There's no doubt in my mind that I will be sending Chris a congratulatory text later today.
Well, that's
Kelly. I'll also be voting for Kelly Kraut, who we had as a guest on the show, and Lisa Parks, who's a candidate for Common Good. I'm going to be voting for her, and so it's
great. Well, let's follow up with all these good people and start chipping them along. All right, everybody. Hey, thanks for your participation in the podcast. Thanks for your participation online. And do we miss anything in the comments? As Rob mentioned, I've got a different setup today that I'm experimenting with. And one of the downsides to it that I've got to figure out is I can't see the comments.
No, they're just good conversation. Yeah, good conversation and folks having good chats.
Good chitty chats. Good.
But
Well, hey, we'll
the regular cast of characters, Trisha and Jim and
great.
Kathleen and
Hey, and to all you good people, if you're not yet over on YouTube and liking the channel and watching over there, we're going to want you to do that. So make that move if you would. And, Facebook or Twitter or Twitch are your normal portals in. Head yourself on over there to the channel and watch it on the live stream on YouTube. It helps us in a whole lot of ways that we don't have to get into right now, but it really does help. So it's just better if you do. All right, Rob, we'll see you later.
Bye-bye.